Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing some Sharks news. Today is July 1st, so all the contracts are coming in. And while Timo Meier technically didn't have to sign on this date because he is a restricted free agent, he has, and it is a 4-year, $6 million contract. Now, there are other happenings in the league related to the Sharks. Players like Donskoy and Nyquist have their future set up for them. I won't talk about that in this video. I wait for all the cards to fall for things like LeBanc and Pavelski as well before I put that all into one video. But Timo Meier in particular, because it was an important contract and because this is actually one of the more interesting contracts I've seen, I felt the need to make a specific video about it. So as I said, 4 years, $6 million, which is basically a bridge deal of bridge deals. Most people see a bridge deal as usually 2 or maybe 3 years. Most people see long-term contracts that are at the very least 5 years. And so 4 years is basically, I'm still giving you some decent, a few decent years, but we're not actually going long-term here. Now, this would actually give Timo Meier 7 years in the NHL, which you might think would make him an unrestricted free agent by the end of this deal because of the fact that unrestricted free agency is reached by either being 27 years old or by playing 7 years in the NHL. But because Timo Meier only played 34 games in his first season, this makes it so he didn't actually reach the requirements of being an unrestricted free agent. And as such, at the end of these 4 years, he will still be a restricted free agent, which has many people up in arms as this being one of the best contracts of the day and likely will be one of the best contracts at the day when, the dust settles at the end of it. But this doesn't mean that Timo Meier got absolutely destroyed in contract negotiations. While 6 years or $6 million for a player of his caliber is obviously incredibly cheap, especially when you can compare it to a player like Jeff Skinner, who admittedly was an unrestricted free agent but got $9.5 million. And when you compare it to the inflated restricted free agent market or the expected inflated restricted free agent market, where players like Rantanen are requesting $10 million, players like Marner expect to be paid Matthews level with like $11.5 million. This Timo Meier contract coming in at just about $6 million is a huge blow to basically all the other RFAs on the market who were expecting to maybe get massive deals. Well, the thing is with Timo Meier's contract is while he is a RFA in the final year of it, the contract is organized in such a way, as reported by Cap Friendly, that the final year of the deal spikes up to worth $10 million. Now, this doesn't affect the cap hit, but what this does affect is that in the final, or after the 4 years are done, if the Sharks want to retain Timo Meier's restricted free agent rights, they would obviously have to give him a qualifying offer, which would be worth 1 year and $10 million. So if the Sharks want to retain the negotiation rights, they're giving Timo Meier a 1 year, $10 million deal, and he will, of course, immediately accept that. And so some people are actually viewing Timo Meier's contract as a 5-year, $34 million contract, which would be at about $7 million average annual value. But since it's technically not a 5-year deal, it's 4 years and then potentially 1 year, Doug Wilson has managed to get the cap hit just about $1 million lower than what a 5-year, $34 million contract would be. So some very nice maneuvering around the cap by Doug Wilson to actually work this out. Now, that some people call certain GMs like David Poile a cap wizard for being able to sign low contracts. I mean, let's say someone like Matt Duchene, who has signed 7 years, $8 million with Nashville Predators. People are saying, oh, how did Poile manage to pull this off? This isn't more so Poile being, a god of contract negotiations, but more so Duchene really wanting to come to Nashville, and I suspect not wanting to hamper their contract situation, especially with Yossi coming up, all too much. While for something like Timo Meier and Doug Wilson in this situation, I think this is a very, very smart move by Doug Wilson. Certainly deserves all the credit for being able to negotiate a contract like this. And so for basically Timo Meier, it's either you go for the 5 years at technically $34 million with that $10 million in the final year, or if you're the Sharks or if you're Timo Meier, you can forego that final year as a restricted free agent, either negotiate a contract prior, considering him technically being a UFA, or you decide to not tender your qualifying offer, he becomes an unrestricted free agent, and then you negotiate it just like that. So a very smart move from Doug Wilson. This isn't a terrible deal for Timo Meier because, as I said, while $6 million is certainly underselling him somewhat, with the extra $10 million potentially as the fifth year, it is just about fair value of about $7 million, and this takes him straight to UFA in a way, as I'm saying, even though he is technically an RFA in that final after the contract is up. So good deal for San Jose, good deal for the player Timo Meier, and a good start, I guess you could say, to the key contracts that the Sharks are being able to re-sign. Now, of course, many people already know that some things have happened that maybe won't be as fun for the Sharks, but it's good to see that Timo Meier is locked up at least for the next 4 years. Class dismissed.